The last thing my husband said to me, his voice a dry whisper from the hospital bed, was, "Don't ever let them make you feel small, Martha." I thought he meant strangers, the faceless bureaucracy of widowhood. I never, in a million years, thought he meant our own daughter. But that Christmas, as her hand slammed against my chair and sent me stumbling, I finally understood. The most dangerous people aren't the strangers you fear, they're the family you trust. And the seat she denied me wasn't just a place at the table, it was a declaration of war. Hey everyone. Has someone you love ever made you feel invisible? Like your entire history, your entire worth, could be erased in a single, heartless moment? If that feeling resonates with you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. This story is for anyone who's ever been pushed aside and found the strength to push back. You're going to want to see how this ends. Part 1, The Hollow Echo. Grief is a strange architect. It hollows you out, room by room, until your own home feels like a museum of a life you once lived. After Richard passed, the silence in our 4-bedroom colonial was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards was a ghost. His favorite armchair, worn in the shape of his body, sat empty in the living room, a silent, threadbare accusation. The smell of his pipe tobacco lingered faintly in the study, a scent that once meant comfort but now just meant absence. We had lived in that house for 42 years. We'd raised Emily there, marked her height on the kitchen doorframe, watched her ride her first bike down the driveway, and waved goodbye as she left for college. It was a house built on love and laughter, and without Richard, it was just a building. Emily called every day. "Mom, you can't stay there alone. It's too much for you," she'd say, her voice thick with a concern that sounded genuine. "The upkeep, the memories, it's not healthy. Sell it. Move down here, be closer to me and the kids. You'll never be lonely again." Her words were a life raft in the churning ocean of my sorrow. The thought of seeing my grandchildren, Leo and Maya, every day instead of just on holidays was a beacon of light. The thought of family dinners, of laughter filling the silence, of being needed, it was everything. So, I did it. I packed up 42 years of life into cardboard boxes, each one sealed with a piece of my heart. I sold the house where I'd become a wife and a mother, the only home I'd ever truly known since leaving my parents. The proceeds from the sale were substantial. Richard had been a meticulous planner. We were comfortable. When I arrived in the bustling, unfamiliar suburb where Emily lived, I stayed in a temporary apartment while I looked for a place of my own. That's when the conversations about their house started. "We're just so cramped, Mom," Emily would sigh, gesturing around her perfectly nice, but in her eyes, tragically small, 3-bedroom home. Her husband, Tom, a decent but perpetually stressed accountant, would just nod along, rubbing his temples. With the kids getting bigger, and Tom's work-from-home setup, we're bursting at the seams. And this mortgage is killing us. We'll never be able to afford anything bigger in this market. A week later, another comment. Margaret, Tom's mom, was just saying how she wishes she could help us upgrade, but you know, her funds are all tied up. The mention of Margaret was always casual, but pointed. Margaret, a woman who wore her quiet wealth like a bespoke coat, always impeccable, always slightly disapproving of me, the baker's daughter who married her son's boss. The hints became less subtle. They drive me past a beautiful, sprawling 5-bedroom house a few streets over. "Isn't it a dream, Mom? It just went on the market. We could host proper family holidays there. You could have your own suite. It would be perfect." I knew what she was doing. And a part of me, the part that was terrified of being alone, didn't care. I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to be the center of my family again, the matriarch who could provide, the way Richard and I always had. So I made the offer. "What if I bought it for you?" I said one evening, as we looked at the listing online. Emily's eyes widened, a flicker of something, not just gratitude, but a sharp, hungry triumph, shining within them. "Mom, you can't be serious." "I am," I said, my heart swelling with the joy of being able to give them this. "I'll buy it in cash. No mortgage for you to worry about. It will be your home." My gift to you. The gratitude was overwhelming, for a time. There were tears, hugs, endless thank yous. We found a lawyer, a man Emily recommended, to handle the sale. He was young, slick, and seemed to speak a language I didn't quite understand. When it came time to sign the final papers, a strange, quiet instinct, maybe Richard's voice whispering in my ear, made me pause. I'd like the title to remain in my name, for now, I told the lawyer in a private meeting. For tax purposes. We can transfer it to Emily and Tom in a few years. The lawyer raised an eyebrow but shrugged. It's your money, Mrs. Gable. I felt a pang of guilt, as if I were mistrusting my own child. To soothe it, I never mentioned it to Emily. I let her believe the house was entirely hers. I bought a small, elegant condo for myself about 15 minutes away, close enough to be involved, but far enough, I thought, to give them their space. The lie was a small stone in my shoe, a minor discomfort I chose to ignore for the sake of peace. And for 2 years, it seemed to work. I was part of their lives. I babysat, I helped with gardening, I brought over homemade meals. But little things began to surface. My decorating suggestions for the new house were met with polite smiles and then completely ignored. Family plans were made, and I was informed as an afterthought. More and more, I felt like a utility, useful, but not essential. The person they called when they needed something, not the person they called just to talk. Emily's praise for her mother-in-law, Margaret, grew more frequent and lavish. Margaret has such incredible taste. She helped me pick out all the new furniture. Margaret took me to her club for lunch. We had the most amazing time. Margaret says this neighborhood is a real investment. Margaret was a constant presence, gliding through the house I had paid for with an air of ownership. She'd rearrange throw pillows, critique the brand of olive oil in the pantry, and offer backhanded compliments. "Oh, Martha, that casserole is so rustic. You must give me the recipe sometime," she'd say, knowing full well her own kitchen looked like a stainless steel operating room where no rustic casserole had ever dared to exist. I swallowed it all. I told myself this was the price of admission. The price of not being alone. I convinced myself I was being overly sensitive, a lonely old woman seeing slights where there were none. Which brings us to Christmas. Christmas had always been my holiday. Richard and I would host everyone. The scent of pine from the massive tree he'd chopped down himself, the sound of Bing Crosby on the record player, the table groaning under the weight of food I'd spent 2 days preparing. My seat was at the head of the table. Always. From there, Richard would carve the turkey, his hands sure and strong, and pass me the first slice. It was our tradition. A symbol of our partnership, our family. This year, for the first time, it was at Emily and Tom's new house. My new house. I arrived early, my arms full of gifts and the pecan pie that was my father's recipe. I was humming, genuinely happy, imagining the laughter, the music, the feeling of family. The house was decorated beautifully, I had to admit. But it was all Margaret's taste. Cold, silver and white, minimalist and sterile, like a photograph from a magazine. Not a single one of the mismatched, handmade ornaments the kids had made over the years was on the tree. Margaret was already there, holding a glass of champagne, looking regal and perfect by the fireplace. Tom was fussing with the sound system. The kids, Leo and Maya, gave me quick, distracted hugs before running back to their new video games. Emily kissed my cheek. "Mom, you made it. Can you give me a hand in the kitchen?" For the next hour, I was her assistant. I mashed potatoes, I stirred gravy, I transferred the turkey to the platter. I did it happily, feeling useful, feeling part of it all. When it was finally time to eat, Emily announced, "Everyone, take your seats." The dining room was magnificent. Candles flickered, casting a warm glow on the polished silver. I breathed it all in, the smell of roasted turkey and rosemary, and felt a profound sense of peace. This was it. This was why I'd done it all. I walked toward the head of the table. The chair, a grand, high-backed thing, was waiting. It was the seat of the matriarch. My seat. I put my hand on the back of it, a wave of nostalgia for Christmases past washing over me. Mom. Emily's voice was sharp. It cut through my reverie like a shard of glass. I turned. She wasn't smiling. Her expression was tight, strained. She glanced meaningfully toward her mother-in-law, who was hovering nearby, a placid, knowing smile on her face. "That seat's for Margaret," Emily said, her voice low but firm, as if I were a child she was scolding. "She's our guest of honor. Please, you can sit at the end." I blinked, sure I had misheard. I looked at the vast expanse of the table, at the single seat set at the very far end, next to the swinging door to the kitchen. The seat for the help. The seat for the afterthought. A little laugh escaped my lips. "Oh, sweetie, you're joking." "I'm not joking," she snapped, her patience gone. "I can't have Margaret sitting at the foot of the table. It's disrespectful. Please, just move." The whole room had gone silent. Tom was staring at his plate, his face flushed. Leo and Maya were frozen, their eyes wide. Margaret simply watched, her smile unwavering, her victory assured. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hand was still on the chair, a desperate anchor in a suddenly hostile sea. I couldn't move. It wasn't just a chair. It was my husband. It was our 42 years. It was my place in this family, and she was trying to take it from me. When I hesitated, my mind scrambling to find the right words to fix this, to rewind the last 30 seconds, Emily took a step forward. And she pushed the chair. Not me, not directly, but she shoved the heavy oak chair I was holding onto, forcing me to stumble back a step to regain my balance. The sound of the chair legs scraping against the hardwood floor was like a gunshot in the silent room. I stumbled. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I looked at my daughter's face, and what I saw there broke me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was cold, hard indifference. She had weighed my feelings against Margaret's status, and I had been found wanting. No one moved. No one spoke. Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. Margaret finally broke the silence with a soft, condescending cluck of her tongue. "Emily, dear, perhaps we should just dash." "It's fine," I heard myself say. My voice was thin, a stranger's voice. I walked the long, lonely path to the end of the table and sat down, my hands trembling in my lap. The dinner conversation started up again, forced and brittle. Laughter that didn't reach anyone's eyes. Stories were told, toasts were made. No one looked at me. No one spoke to me. I was a ghost at the feast, invisible, insignificant. I moved food around my plate, the taste of ash in my mouth. Every cheer, every clink of a glass, was a fresh wave of humiliation. I saw it all with horrifying clarity then. The fawning over Margaret, the casual dismissal of my opinions, the forgotten promises. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time slight. This was the new reality. I wasn't the matriarch. I was the bank. A resource to be tapped, and then, once the transaction was complete, to be stored away in a quiet corner. That night, after refusing a ride home and taking a taxi in the cold, I sat in my silent condo. The pecan pie was still on their counter, untouched. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cold, hard knot in my chest. My husband's last words echoed in the silence. "Don't ever let them make you feel small, Martha." They had. They had made me feel microscopic. But as the hours ticked by, and the grief and humiliation began to curdle into a slow, burning rage, another memory surfaced. The slick, young lawyer. The document I had insisted on. The small, secret act of self-preservation I had felt so guilty about. The title is in my name. I opened my laptop. The screen cast a pale, blue glow in the dark room. I might be old, I might be a grieving widow, and I might have been foolish enough to trade my security for the illusion of family. But I was not helpless. Emily had forgotten who I was. She had forgotten whose money had bought that table, those chairs, that roof over her ungrateful head. And I was about to give her a Christmas lesson she would never, ever forget. Part 2, The Anatomy of Betrayal. The drive home in the taxi was a blur of Christmas lights mocking me from other people's windows. Each twinkling Santa, each glowing reindeer, felt like a personal insult. I sat perfectly still on the cold vinyl seat, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white mountains on a pale, wrinkled map. The driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, a flicker of concern on his face. He probably thought I was ill. In a way, I was. A sickness of the soul had taken hold, a cold venom of betrayal pumping through my veins where warm blood should have been. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even change out of my Christmas dress. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, while the scene at the dinner table played on a torturous loop in my mind. The scrape of the chair. The sudden, sharp loss of balance. The look on Emily's face, not of apology, but of annoyance, as if I were an inconvenient piece of furniture she'd had to move. The utter, complete silence from her husband, Tom. The smug, serene satisfaction radiating from Margaret. Every detail was a fresh stab. I remembered the way Maya, my own granddaughter, had quickly looked down at her lap, her cheeks red with a shame I knew wasn't for her mother's actions, but for my public humiliation. She was embarrassed for me, not angry for me. That thought, somehow, hurt worst of all. They were learning. Emily was teaching them that Grandma was disposable. Around 3 a.m., my body started to shake. It was a deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my bones. It was rage. A pure, undiluted rage I hadn't felt since a boy in the schoolyard had broken my brother's glasses 50 years ago. It was the righteous anger of the deeply wronged. Richard's voice was there again, a steady baritone in the chaos of my thoughts. Don't let them make you feel small. He was right. I had let them. I had paid for the privilege of being diminished, one condescending comment, one cancelled plan, one unreturned phone call at a time. The chair wasn't the beginning. It was the culmination. The next morning, Boxing Day, my phone rang at 10 o'clock. It was Emily. Her voice was breezy, disgustingly normal. Morning, Mom. Are you feeling better today? You left so abruptly last night, you didn't even have any pie. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Feeling better? I repeated, my voice flat. Yeah, you seemed really out of sorts. Moody, she said. There it was. The first coat of paint in her grand masterpiece of gaslighting. My reaction wasn't valid, it was a mood. An inconvenience. Listen, Tom and I were thinking of taking the kids to the movies this afternoon. Did you want to come? It was a test. She was checking to see if I would fall back in line. If I would swallow the disrespect and show up, smiling, grateful for the crumbs of affection she was tossing my way. The old me, the lonely widow desperate for connection, would have said yes. She was counting on it. No, Emily, I said, the coldness in my own voice surprising me. There was a pause. Oh. Okay. Well, maybe another time. Are you sure you're okay? You sound weird. I have things to do, I said, and I hung up before she could reply. The things I had to do involved pulling out the thick file folder from the bottom drawer of my desk. It was labeled, Property, Oak Street. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped, replaced by a crystalline sense of purpose. I spread the documents out on my dining table. The deed of sale. The title certificate. All of it, clear as day, with one name on it, Martha Gable. For the next few weeks, I became a ghost. I didn't answer Emily's calls, which became more frequent and more annoyed. Her texts went from, "Are you okay?" to, "Mom, seriously, what is your problem?" to, "This is childish. Call me." I let her words bounce off the armor I was building around myself. During this time, I started documenting. I made a list. A long, painful list of every slight, every moment of disrespect I had brushed aside. The time Emily borrowed $5,000 for a minor plumbing emergency, that turned out to be a down payment on a luxury vacation to the Caribbean she posted all over social media. When I'd gently inquired about it, she'd laughed it off. "Oh, Mom, you know I'm good for it. Don't be so stuffy." I never saw a dime. The numerous times I was called to babysit with less than an hour's notice, forcing me to cancel my own plans, book club, a lunch with friends, only for Emily and Tom to come home hours late, smelling of wine, without a word of apology. Once, they canceled on me when I was already on their doorstep, because Margaret had decided to pop by and take them out to dinner instead. I was sent home like a dismissed servant. The constant, subtle reprogramming of my grandchildren. It used to be, Grandma Martha's cookies are the best. Now it was, Grandma Margaret is taking us to Paris this summer. It used to be my stories of their mother as a little girl that made them laugh. Now, my stories were interrupted. "Mom, don't bore them with that old stuff." Margaret's hand was in everything. The house I bought was slowly being remade in her image. My offer to help plant my prize-winning roses in the garden was rebuffed. "Margaret has a landscape architect who has a whole vision for the yard, Mom. Your roses are lovely, but they just don't fit the aesthetic." Each memory was a nail, hammering the lid on the coffin of the relationship I thought we had. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. I hadn't been pushed from a chair at Christmas. I had been undergoing a slow, methodical eviction from my own family for the past 2 years. Margaret, with her money and her influence and her aesthetic, was the new tenant. I was the old one, being priced out, squeezed out, and left on the curb. The final straw, the thing that obliterated any lingering doubt, came in late January. I had a doctor's appointment in Emily's town, and on a whim, I decided to drive past the house. I parked across the street, partially hidden by a large oak tree. I don't know what I was expecting to see. What I saw was a large, expensive-looking SUV pull into the driveway, Margaret's, of course. She got out, followed by a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. It was the real estate agent who had sold me, the house. Emily came out the front door, beaming, and gave them both enthusiastic hugs. They all went inside together, curiosity gnawed at me. An hour later, they emerged, all smiles and handshakes. After they left, I waited. My heart was beating a slow, heavy drum of dread. I knew what this was, but I didn't want to believe it. That evening, I did something I wasn't proud of, but felt was necessary. I had helped Emily set up her computer and knew she used a simple, predictable password for most things, the name of her childhood dog. I logged into her email account. My hands trembled as I typed. I felt like a trespasser, a spy. But what I found confirmed my worst fears and solidified my resolve into something as hard and as cold as granite. There was a long email chain between Emily, Tom, Margaret, and the real estate agent. The subject line was, valuation and home equity loan. They were trying to borrow against the house. My house. The emails laid it all out. They wanted to take out a massive loan for a new business venture for Tom and to fund an extension on the back of the house designed by Margaret's architect. In one email, Emily wrote to her mother-in-law. "The bank needs to see the title, but our lawyer is sorting that out. He says since my mom paid in cash and it was a gift, getting her to sign the transfer papers should be a formality. She's been a bit moody lately, so I'll handle it delicately, but honestly, what choice does she have? It's our house. She's just being difficult. What choice does she have?" The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. The entitlement. They saw me as a senile old woman, a mere technicality, a signature on a piece of paper standing between them and their glorious, financed future. They weren't just disrespecting me, they were actively plotting to leverage my life savings, my final gift from my husband, for their own gain, all while treating me as a nuisance. I closed the laptop, the click echoing in the silent room. The betrayal was absolute. It was financial, emotional, and profound. The struggle was over. The doubt was gone. There would be no more attempts at reconciliation, no more quiet suffering. My daughter had asked what choice I had. She was about to find out. The next morning, I didn't just have things to do. I had a war to plan. And my first call was not to a family therapist. It was to a man named David Chin, the most ruthless real estate lawyer my late husband had always kept on retainer for his business dealings. For when things get ugly, Richard used to say with a grim smile. When I explained the situation to Mr. Chin over the phone, there was a long pause. Then he said, his voice a low, appreciative hum, "Mrs. Gable, this is going to be very, very interesting." And for the first time in a month, I smiled. Part 3, The Quiet Architect of Ruin. The decision, once made, was like lancing a wound. The pain was sharp and terrible, but for the first time in months, the poison began to drain away, replaced by something clean and cold, purpose. My grief for the daughter I thought I had was compartmentalized, packed away like the family heirlooms she'd rejected. The woman who had cried in her lonely condo was gone. In her place stood an architect, and the blueprint on her table was for a fortress of solitude and a beautifully executed demolition. My first meeting with David Chin was in a sterile, glass-walled office that overlooked the city. He was a small, impeccably dressed man with eyes that didn't miss a thing. He listened to my entire story without interruption, his hands steepled under his chin. He reviewed the deed, the title, and the copies of the emails I had printed. When I finished, he looked at me, a glimmer of respect in his sharp eyes. "Mrs. Gable, legally, your position is ironclad. The house is yours. Period. You can evict them tomorrow." "An eviction is loud," I said quietly. "It's messy. It gives them a platform to play the victim. I've been the quiet, invisible woman for 2 years. I want to end this the same way I've been living it, quietly, efficiently, and with no room for argument." A slow smile spread across his face. "I see. You don't want to just win. You want to control the narrative. So, what do you have in mind?" "I want them to go to sleep in their house and wake up homeless," I said. "I want them to experience, for just one morning, the same sudden, jarring displacement I felt when my daughter pushed me away from that table." From that day forward, my life had a secret, parallel track. On the surface, I was Martha Gable, a quiet widow. I went to my book club, I tended the small garden on my balcony, I exchanged pleasantries with my neighbors. I continued to ignore Emily's increasingly frantic and angry calls, creating a wall of impenetrable silence. Let her think I was being moody. Let her think I was being childish. The less she knew about my actual state of mind, the better. But in secret, I was a general planning a campaign. Mr. Chen and I became co-conspirators. He handled the legal framework, and I handled the logistics. First, we needed a definitive date. The perfect moment. I knew from the emails that they were meeting with the bank for the final loan approval in the second week of March. They needed my signature on the title transfer to close the deal. Emily had mentioned in one of her last, furious voicemails that they were all going away for a long weekend for Tom's 45th birthday, a lavish trip to a spa resort, no doubt funded by Margaret, the weekend before the bank meeting. Friday to Monday. That was my window. Next, the contents of the house. As much as I despised them, I didn't want my grandchildren's favorite toys or their family photo albums thrown on the street. That wasn't justice, it was cruelty. And this was about justice. "I'll hire a moving company," I told Mr. Chin. "A discreet one. They will pack up the entire contents of the house and put it into a climate-controlled storage unit." "In whose name?" he asked. "In mine," I said. "I will pay for the first 3 months. It is the last charitable thing I will ever do for them. They will receive a key and the address in a package from you after the fact. How and when they retrieve their belongings is their problem." Then came the locks. This required the most delicate touch. I couldn't just have a locksmith show up on Monday morning. It had to be done and dusted before they returned. I found a 24/7 emergency locksmith service and booked them for 8 p.m. on Sunday night. I would meet them there myself. I would be the one to turn the new key for the first time. There were moments of intense, heart-pounding fear. Close calls that felt like warnings from the universe. One afternoon, I was on the phone with Mr. Chen, using a cheap pay-as-you-go burner phone I'd bought for this exact purpose, when my condo's buzzer rang. I nearly dropped the phone. It was Emily. I could see her on the small black and white security screen, her arms crossed, her face a mask of irritation. She hadn't been here in months. "Mom, I know you're in there," her tinny voice crackled through the intercom. "We need to talk. This has gone on long enough. I have papers I need you to sign for the house." My blood ran cold. I stood frozen in my hallway, the burner phone hot in my hand. I held my breath, praying she couldn't hear me through the door. I heard her sigh, a long, exasperated sound, and then the click of her heels as she walked away. I sank against the wall, my legs trembling. She was getting desperate. The bank's deadline was approaching. My timeline was shrinking. The week before Tom's birthday trip, the pressure ramped up. A flood of texts. Voicemails from Tom, trying his good cop routine. "Martha, please. We're all worried about you. Emily is she's stressed. Let's just sit down and talk this through." Then came an email from Margaret. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. Subject: Family Concerns. "Dearest Martha, I hope this note finds you well. I am writing out of deep concern for Emily. She is terribly distressed by your recent silence. We are all a family, and in families, we must learn to forgive minor misunderstandings. Whatever transpired over the holidays, I am sure it was not meant with any malice. Holding on to anger is not healthy, especially at our age. Tom and Emily have a wonderful opportunity with the bank, and your signature is the last little piece of the puzzle. It would be a shame to see your stubbornness stand in the way of your own daughter's happiness and security. Warmly, Margaret." Your stubbornness. Minor misunderstandings. The condescension dripped from every word. She was scolding me, framing my profound hurt as a petty grudge. She had no idea she was fanning the flames, solidifying my resolve until it was diamond hard. I printed her email and placed it on top of the pile. Exhibit A. The Friday they were set to leave, I did one last drive-by. I saw them loading their expensive luggage into Tom's car. They looked happy, carefree, excited about their weekend away. Emily was laughing at something Tom said. She had no idea that she was laughing in the driveway of a house she would never sleep in again. I felt a strange, detached calm watching them. It was like observing characters in a play, and I was the only one in the audience who knew how it was going to end. The weekend was a blur of final preparations. I confirmed the movers for Saturday morning. I confirmed the locksmith for Sunday evening. I arranged for a cleaner to come in Monday morning to scrub the place clean of their existence, preparing it for its rightful owner. I packed a small overnight bag for myself. On Saturday morning, I sat in my car down the street, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum. At precisely 9 a.m., a large, unmarked white truck pulled up to the house. A team of 4 men, led by a burly supervisor I'd spoken to named Hector, got out. I had paid a premium for their speed and discretion. Hector met me at my car window. "Mrs. Gable. We're ready to begin. The key you gave me works." "Thank you, Hector," I said, my voice even. "Be careful with the items in the children's rooms. Everything else is just stuff." He nodded, a professional who didn't need the backstory. For the next 8 hours, I watched them work. They were a whirlwind of efficiency, emptying the house piece by piece. The minimalist furniture Margaret had chosen. The oversized television. The boxes of clothes and kitchenware. A life being packed away into a truck. It was a surreal sight. By 5 p.m., they were finished. The truck pulled away, leaving the house looking exactly the same from the outside, but I knew that inside, it was just a hollow shell. An echo chamber of their arrogance. Sunday was a day of quiet anticipation. I read a book. I drank tea. I waited. That evening, I drove to the house. The street was dark and quiet. I met the locksmith, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Just changing all the exterior locks, he asked, yawning. Yes. All of them. And the garage. He worked quickly. The rasp of the drill, the click of new tumblers falling into place, it was the sweetest music I had ever heard. He handed me a set of new keys. They felt heavy and powerful in my hand. All set, ma'am. I paid him in cash, and he drove off into the night. For a long moment, I just stood on the porch, under the sensor light that had been paid for with my money. I looked at the new, gleaming brass of the deadbolt. Then, I put the key in the lock. It turned smoothly, decisively. I stepped inside. The house was empty. Utterly, profoundly empty. The lack of furniture made the room seem cavernous. My footsteps echoed on the bare hardwood floors. The air smelled of dust and absence. It was no longer their home. It was just a property. An asset. My asset. I walked from room to room, a silent queen reclaiming her castle. I stood in the dining room and looked at the empty space at the head of the table where I should have sat. The ghost of that humiliation was still there, but it was fading, losing its power. I didn't stay long. I locked the deadbolt behind me, the sound a satisfying final thump. I went back to my condo. I laid out my clothes for the next day. I set my alarm. And for the first time in 2 years, I slept a deep, dreamless sleep. Tomorrow, my daughter would be calling. And for the very first time, I would be ready to answer. Part 4, The Sound of Silence. Monday morning dawned crisp and clear. I woke before my alarm, feeling a strange and total serenity. There was no anxiety, no fear, just the quiet hum of an engine that has been meticulously tuned and is now, finally, ready to run. I made coffee, a special dark roast Richard had loved, and sat by my window, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. I imagined Emily and Tom in their car, driving home from their luxurious weekend, complaining about the traffic, blissfully unaware that their world had been dismantled while they were getting massages and sipping champagne. Mr. Chen had sent the official correspondence via courier to arrive at my condo that morning. It was a simple, elegant package. Inside was a letter addressed to Emily and Tom Gable, a single key to the storage unit, and a legal notice of trespass, stating that if they were found on the property at Oak Street, they would be arrested. Cold. Final. Irrevocable. My phone, the personal one I'd been ignoring for weeks, sat silently on the counter. The calm before the storm. At 11:47 a.m., it began. The first call was from Emily. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text. What the hell? The key isn't working. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The rich, bitter taste was exquisite. A second call, immediately after the first. Voicemail. A third. A fourth. The calls started coming faster, tumbling one after the other. Tom started calling, too. The phone was buzzing against the granite countertop like a trapped, angry insect. I watched the screen light up with their names, a morbid form of entertainment. Emily Gable. Tom Gable. Emily Gable. Emily Gable. Tom Gable. Then came the texts, a frantic waterfall of panic and rage. Mom, answer your phone right now. This isn't funny. What did you do? The locks are changed. There's a sign on the door from a lawyer. Where is our stuff? Mom, where is everything? The questions grew more hysterical. The accusations more wild. The phone buzzed and lit up, over and over. I counted them. 10 missed calls. 20. 35. 40. Each one was a small, satisfying chime of victory. Each one was payback for every ignored phone call of my own, every dismissive comment, every moment I was made to feel small and insignificant. I let it go on for almost an hour. I let them stand on the manicured lawn of the house they thought was theirs, in front of the neighbors they were so desperate to impress. I let their confusion fester into panic, and their panic curdle into the impotent fury of the utterly powerless. On the 47th call, when I imagined her voice would be shredded with screaming, I answered. I leaned back in my chair, holding my warm coffee mug, and swiped the green icon. "Hello?" I said, my voice calm and gentle. For a second, there was just choked, ragged breathing on the other end. Then, her voice exploded from the speaker, raw and shrill. "Mom? Oh my God, Mom. What is happening? What did you do? We can't get in the house. All our things are gone. The whole house is empty." I could hear Tom yelling in the background, the kids were crying, a chaotic symphony of their world collapsing. "The police are here," she shrieked, and I heard a new voice, a calm, authoritative male voice, in the background. My heart gave a little flutter, but I held my ground. Mr. Chen had prepared me for this. "I imagine they are," I said placidly. "Did you show them the notice on the door? And the deed to the house?" I'm sure Mr. Chen would have advised the local precinct that the legal owner of the property might have some uninvited guests today. There was a stunned silence. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head, the dawning, horrific realization. The deed," she stammered. "What are you talking about? This is our house." "No, honey," I said, and the word honey dripped with a sweet poison I had stored up for 2 long years. "That was the misunderstanding. It was never your house. It was always my house. I was just letting you live in it. But, you gave it to us. It was a gift," she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "A gift is something you treasure, Emily. Something you respect. You don't take a gift and try to secretly borrow against it. You don't stand in a gifted house and disrespect the person who gave it to you," I said, my voice dropping a little, the memory of Christmas giving it a hard, sharp edge. "That night, at Christmas. When you pushed me. You didn't just push me away from a chair. You pushed me out of your life. You and Margaret and Tom made it very clear what my place was. Or rather, that I no longer had one." She started sobbing then. Huge, gulping, theatrical sobs. "Mom, please. It was a mistake. I was stressed, Margaret was there, I didn't mean it. Please, we have nowhere to go. The kids." The mention of the children was a low blow, and she knew it. But the wound she'd inflicted was too deep for that kind of blackmail now. "You'll figure something out," I said coolly. "You're a resourceful girl. Perhaps Margaret has a spare room. The furniture in her guest suite is probably exquisite. As for all your things, a package is waiting for you at my condo. It contains a key. You have 3 months of paid storage to sort through it." I took one last, long sip of my coffee. It was perfect. I could hear her starting to plead again, the empty, desperate promises of a cornered animal. But I was done listening. "Oh, honey," I said softly, letting a small, genuine smile touch my lips for the first time. "That house, that seat, belongs to me." Then I hung up. I turned the phone off and placed it on the counter. The silence that filled my small condo was absolute. It was the most peaceful, beautiful sound I had ever heard. The fallout was, as Mr. Chen predicted, messy but contained. They apparently went to Margaret's. I can only imagine that conversation. The police, after seeing the paperwork Mr. Chen had filed, had informed them it was a civil matter and that they were, in fact, trespassing on my property. Tom tried to hire a lawyer, but no one would take the case after seeing the undeniable proof of my sole ownership. A few mutual family friends called, tentatively, having heard some wild, mangled version of the story from a hysterical Emily. I calmly explained to them, without emotion, that there had been a financial disagreement regarding an asset I owned and that I had decided to reclaim my property. I told them I wished Emily and her family well. My calm, rational demeanor stood in stark contrast to the screaming, dramatic tale my daughter was weaving. People didn't know what to believe, but in the end, property documents are more convincing than tears. I sold the house. I didn't even go back inside after that first night. I had the cleaners and painters go through it, and I listed it with a different agent. It sold in less a month for a significant profit in the booming market. With the proceeds, I bought myself a smaller, beautiful home in a town by the sea, 3 hours away from anyone I knew. It has a garden where I planted my roses, and a large dining room with a beautiful oak table. At the head of it, sits one chair. My chair. Sometimes I wonder what happened to them. I assume they're fine. People like Emily and Margaret always land on their feet. But I don't know for sure, because I never spoke to any of them again. I changed my number. I left no forwarding address. I simply vanished from their lives. I erased them as completely as they had tried to erase me. My life is quiet now. It's filled with new friends, my book club, long walks on the beach, and the salty air. I'm not lonely. For the first time since Richard died, I feel completely at peace, completely whole. I am not a utility. I am not an afterthought. I am not a bank. I am Martha Gable, and I am the head of my own table. They tried to make me feel small, but in the end, they just reminded me how much space I truly deserved. And I took it. Thank you for listening to my story. The lesson I learned is that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away, and sometimes, you have to burn the bridge to light your own way forward. Have you ever had to make a choice like that? Let me know your story in the comments below. And if you're still with me, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories of justice served. Take care of yourselves, and never, ever let anyone make you feel small.